Today in the kitchen, I'm going to be cooking up a sumptuous T-bone steak. I'm going to serve that with a homemade peppercorn sauce and some homemade triple cooked chips, which are a little bit different than the norm, but we'll come to that later. What you're going to need for this recipe is your steak. You can use this recipe for any cut of steak that you want, but I'm cutting a T-bone steak today. You need 1 full onion, 4 cloves of garlic, some unsalted butter, beef stock, some brined peppercorns, which is basically peppercorns in hot salted water. Let's soak that up. A couple of herbs that I have is flat leaf parsley, thyme and some rosemary. I've also got some double cream and some cognac or brandy for the peppercorn sauce. You don't have to use the cognac or brandy. You can use beef stock if you wish, if you want it non-alcoholic. Any of you guys that are on the Facebook group or follow me on Instagram and Twitter, etc., will know that I am a huge fan of steak. I am your typical bloke, you know, meat and 2 veg. Steak is my treat. I probably eat a little bit too much of it, if I'm totally honest, but I've tried to cut back a little bit on my red meat. But this was on offer in Lidl. Big shout out to Lidl. These steaks are fantastic. Not as thick as I'd like, but there's plenty of steak there. One of these will serve 2. If you wanted like a romantic dinner, you wanted a steak dinner, one of these will serve 2 people. If you wish, you can have it on your own. There is basically 2 steaks on either side of the bone, but we'll come to that later on. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. So let's just quickly talk about our steak. I've took this out of the fridge and I've let it come to room temperature. You want to do that for at least half an hour. You don't want to be putting a cold steak in the pan. I've also salted this steak, patted it dry, salted it, and just left it to sit at room temperature. The reason we add salt to it is to try and draw out as much moisture as possible. And what we'll do is before we put that in the pan, we'll pat it dry again because the salt will draw the moisture to the surface of the meat on each side. So make sure you do that with the steak. You'll get a much nicer, more flavoursome, tender steak if you do this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start on the sauce, and don't worry if you miss anything, you can freeze this video and look back. Also, all the ingredients and the amounts will be below, and a link to the actual full recipe on my website. So the first thing we're going to do is dice our onion nice and fine. Prep done. We now get 3 tablespoons of our butter in a pan, melt that down, and we'll add our onions in. We're going to let them sweat off and cook down just to the point where they become kind of almost transparent and they're fully cooked and soft. Add in the garlic, give that a good mix again and cook that through. We don't want to brown the garlic here, we just want to cook it through and season as best you can. Quite a lot of pepper, a little bit of salt. We're not flavouring the pepper sauce here, we're just seasoning at this stage. We'll add our pepper flavouring in a second. Give that a good mix through and in go our peppers. Green peppers work really well. I've used a mix of different peppers here, just my favourite peppercorns that I like the taste of. Go in there with our beef stock, bring that to the boil and then turn it down. And then we want to go in with the parsley and thyme, about 3 sprigs of thyme. Will be suffice here. We will remove them before serving, but you'll leave them in there. All the leaves will just melt away. Add in our cream. Again, give that another good stir, and we're going to bring that to the boil and then turn it down and let that simmer through and just let all the flavours permeate through the sauce. Add more pepper and a little bit of salt, and this is the point now where you're going to be tasting and testing and getting this peppercorn sauce to your desired taste. Okay, so while my peppercorn sauce is simmering away and getting a bit of colour and a little bit of richness, we're going to move on to the steak. Now your steak is literally going to be done in minutes. I'm going to be cooking on a cast iron skillet. You can just use a normal frying pan, you can use a griddle, you can use whatever you want. The first thing we want to do is season the steak. So I'm going to hit that with more salt. There is still salt on there, don't worry, you cannot over salt this steak. So we're going to hit it with some salt, don't be shy. Some pepper on there, and pat that in. We're going to lose a lot of the seasoning as soon as we start moving the steak around and put it in the pan. So pat it in as best you can. Flip and do the other side. Now I'm using kosher salt, which I prefer when I'm cooking. It's salt, it's exactly the same, it's normal salt, it's just a lot finer. Don't forget to get some seasoning on the edges of your steak as well. Going to get our pan. Remember, you can just use a normal frying pan here or a griddle, it's entirely up to you. I'm using a cast iron because that's what I like to cook my steaks in. We'll start off with some vegetable oil, get that nice and hot, add some butter. You can see the butter starts to bubble, and that's the butter cooking out, and as the bubbles stop, they also will start to turn a browny nutty colour, and that's when we want to add our steak just to take on all the flavours of that cooked butter. We're not going to mess around with this steak, we're going to put it down one side around 3 minutes depending on the thickness of your steak. This steak, 3 minutes is perfect on one side. Flip it. As you can see, we've got a nice crust there. It's looking gorgeous. So we're going to add our herbs, our garlic and some more butter, and then we're going to proceed and start to baste the steak. And by basting the steak, what we're doing is we're keeping it moist and we're adding all the flavour of that butter into the steak. The steak will suck all that up and it will just take on all the flavour of the butter and the garlic and the rosemary. Place your garlic cloves and your rosemary on top of the steak to suck in the juices, like we said, to make sure that they don't burn. If they burn, you'll start to get a bitter taste, especially off the garlic, and we don't want that. So my steak is now resting. You want to rest that steak for about 4 to 5 minutes at least. You want to rest it for as long as you've cooked it, basically. So while that's resting and my peppercorn sauce is still bubbling away, I'm going to get my chips ready. These are my triple cooked chips and these are frozen. So at the minute they've had 2 cooks. I've boiled and fried them once. I've froze them and then I'm gonna fry them for the 3rd time before I serve. This is a really nice way of doing it because it is a bit of a faff making triple cooked chips. If you ever find yourself with a spare hour one afternoon, you can sort of pre-prep and batch cook a load of these to this stage and then have them in the freezer like you would a normal bag of frozen chips. Take them out as you need them and fry them, and there you go, you've got triple cooked chips with minimal effort. But I pre-prepared these are the last of a batch that I cooked. I'm gonna get them in the fryer now at about 190 degrees to cook through, and then we can slice up our steak and serve. All right, it's time to plate up. So I'm going to cut the steak at a bias. You can see here, it's so tender, so juicy, lovely and pink. That steak is cooked perfectly for me. And there we go, our T-bone steak with triple cooked chips and peppercorn sauce. The smell in here is insanely good. I cannot wait to get stuck in. Let's do it. We're going to pour over our peppercorn sauce here. I mean, this would go with anything. You could have béarnaise sauce, garlic sauce, red wine sauce, whatever sauce you like. But look at that, it's just cutting through like butter. That's not even a steak knife, that's just an ordinary knife. In it goes. Steak's melting in your mouth. It's so tender, juicy, beautiful. The peppercorn sauce on the money. Give that peppercorn sauce a try. So, so good. And then obviously the triple cooked chips, which I'll do a video for. Nice and crispy. So good. So soft inside. I mean, you can see it, right? That is a dinner fit for a king. Try it out. Don't forget, there's gonna be loads more videos coming. I'm gonna do not only this kind of fancy stuff, we're all feeling the pinch at the moment, and I've been really coming up with some nice recipes that don't cost a lot to feed the family, and I'm talking feeding the family for between £5 and a tenner being the top end, mostly around £5. And you can feed a family of 4 really easily with a good, wholesome, really tasty meal. So make sure you subscribe, click the button. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Is this the way you cook your steak? Would you cook it the same? I'm gonna eat half this steak and then save half for a sandwich for my lunch tomorrow. I will see you guys in the next video. Take care, see you later.